I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he's expecting to wake up.
Welcome to Team Rabbit Hole Edition 283, Jupiter Returns with Alexandra. Astrologer, artist, Bohemian, Pisces. Join the team as we get to know Alexandra, a powerful woman who is a guide to the mystical practicalities of both inner and outer realities. Currently caravaning the British countryside. Ultimate destination, Portugal. Welcome and well met, Alexandra.
Hello, thank you for having me. Hello from England. Hello from my lovely camper van. I'm doing
the cottage on wheels. Doesn't it have a name?
Morrison.
Okay, as in Jim Morrison, or
as in van.
Okay. 3 letters, wrong ones. All right. So, all right, cool. We'll get into the camper stuff. I can't wait. So something we do on the Team Rabbit Hole podcast is numerologically break down the episode number. I might not do this forever, actually, but at the moment we're still doing it at 283. So 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 8, and then I think, is that right? Am I doing this right? Yeah. So hold on.
4.
Correct, 4, and that's the Emperor card. I was just like, hold on, I think I got this right. So it's the Emperor card, the 4th card. I lead by example. The Emperor card is about setting boundaries and following rules, believing in the concrete world around you, focusing on action and results, holding your ground. Raphael, what card do you have? And Alexandra, if you want to pull a card or not, up to you. No pressure. I know I hadn't mentioned this before. If it's within reach, go for it. If not, just tell us what you're feeling or whatever. Raphael, tell us what you got.
This is the 2 of Pentacles, the Lord of Harmonious Change. Versatility, adaptation, change, especially the change that brings stability to a situation or relationship. And the astrological connotations are Jupiter, and if I'm not completely mistaken, this is Capricorn.
That is correct.
So we have
you are correct.
2 of Earth.
So between the Emperor, which is very earthy and kind of like, square as opposed to the circular nature of the Empress or whatever, and the 2 of Pentacles, and you can pull a card if you want. It looks like you're shuffling. Does anything resonate or pop for you off the cusp? Or, off the bat.
The number 4. I don't know if you can see my board here. You'll see the number 4 is very much like Jupiter. Jupiter is just kind of like a fancy number 4, and of course that's a big part of my life. Jupiter. My company is called Jupiter Returns. I just had my Jupiter return. My North node's ruled by Jupiter. I'm a Pisces, and we're in Pisces season, and Jupiter rules Pisces. So yeah, loads of Jupiter and number 4 stuff going on there. And Raphael pulled Capricorn.
The 2 of Pentacles.
2 of Pentacles, which is also Jupiter and Capricorn.
Jupiter and Capricorn. Okay, right. Yeah, I mean, the Capricorn thing is perfect because we have Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and is just about to go into Pisces in a few days' time. We're kind of feeling some real strong Capricornian Saturnian vibes in life at the moment as it finishes off going through Aquarius. So yeah, I'm not surprised those two archetypes are very present right now.
What have you got in your hands, by the way? What's your card?
It was the It was the 9 of Swords, actually.
Oh, but you didn't like it. You're like, put it back. It's okay. Well, it's a little descriptive of kind of what we've been going through. Not nightmares exactly, but it's like, holy shit. How much, what is really going on here? We've had technical difficulties. We're actually doing this in a manner that we don't normally do, which is on Zoom, but whatever. We're winging it and making it work. If you want to pull another card, you can. but if you wanted to say that was it, I hear that too. Want to be
Okay,
the Ten of Swords.
second choice is the Queen of Swords.
Okay, all right. The witty raconteur, not really raconteur, more like the Ice Queen cliche kind of thing. But you are the knowledgeable woman, bringing us, the information that we doth seek.
I'd like to
The
think so.
lady who knights, the British queen that knights the knights, will be your squires. So,
I'm rather anti-monarchist, actually, but
perfect. Well,
I
there's
can
a new
pretend.
monarchy coming in. Yeah. We can get into that. I mean, I wouldn't know how it feels, obviously. Raphael might. I don't know if Austria has a king or queen. I don't really know. I mean, once upon a time they
you
did.
mean?
Yeah, yeah, right. I was like,
That's
I don't follow this shit.
that's great for like American, PR in terms of education system. No, technically, of course, we don't have a monarchy anymore. But that's, if I start talking about this, I'll go down the rabbit holes too quickly. So, but no,
Word.
officially we have what is it called? A republic.
Republic.
A
Yeah.
republic, and yeah, with how do you call it? Not vicarious representation, representation by parliament, what everyone else has, 2 chambers,
Cool.
1 chancellor, too many ministers, and as always, some strange figures in the back that no one even knows about, so as
Very
everyone.
emperor card. Anyway, so Alexandra, I'm kind of curious, and you can be as long-winded or as short-winded as you like, because I know you're chomping at the bit to get into astrology of the moment. But who art thou? Like, I know you're from England. I'm not even sure where you were, born and raised, and what kind of culture you grew up in, and how did you turn on to astrology and magic and herbal remedies and all this stuff that I know you for. We can get into it later. Your art, I wasn't even aware of the art stuff. I was like, oh shit, she draws like yantras that are, I guess, astrologically informed.
They are. They're not. That's not my own creative work. The
Whatever.
work that I do is placing them together in so a yantra, it's kind of like a visual representation of a mantra. It carries the same kind of energetic frequency, but in picture form rather than in the form of words. But astrologically, you can have yantra that represent each of the planets. So you can use yantra to work with clients in a particular transit, or if you're struggling with the energies of a particular planet, but also just placing them in what's called the Navagraha yantra, which is the yantra of 9 planets, in a way that everything lines up to 9s, and it harmonizes the frequency of all the planets. But the artwork itself isn't my own work. I would love that.
It's all good. That's why I was like, oh shit, she's an artist. And I said artist in the beginning. I guess not at that level, but that's okay. You're still cool as fuck.
I just like to provide tools for people, because so often, like, astrology is a thing where it's like, okay, so you're going to go through this for the next 2 years, and it can be helpful for people to have some tools with which to do the work with, and that's one of the ones that I like. I'm a very creative person. I'm a Pisces. I've got lots of Pisces energy, so yeah.
Slippery when wet, as they say. So I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, are you a Southern English person? What kind, do you have brothers and sisters? I mean, we don't have to go into their names and birthdays, but it's like, what kind of culture are you coming from, and how have you broken away from it? Kind of, how have you been individuating, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, individuating is quite a big deal, really. So I was born in the north of England. Up north, it's everyone thinks that it's kind of grim and hard and a bit depressing up north in England. Yeah, I'm a northerner, and we're kind of a bit more tough up there. People up north in England sort of call the southerners softies because it's warm down here.
I've seen Game of Thrones. I know the cliches. It's like
yes.
Ned Stark versus whatever, the Lannisters or whatever. Very different kind of vibes.
Yes, I'm a wilding, I think. So yeah, a little bit more real. There's a thing I notice wherever I travel in the world, and it's wherever there is a particular amount of hardship, environmentally, culturally, whatever, it tends to equal nicer people. Sure. Obviously I'm biased. But if you go to a country where there's more poverty, you will find that people are typically just a little bit more open-hearted, a little bit more warmer. because there's a need for, support from each other that little bit more. So you tend to, or I've found on my travels in life and throughout the world, that when you go to places where there's a lot of privilege and life is very comfortable, thank you very much, then there's more boundaries between people. There's less of an open-hearted connection. So I moved from the north of England to the south of England during my first Jupiter return. So you have a Jupiter return about every 12 years. And when I was 12, we moved from the north to the south, and it was a huge, huge shock to the system for me culturally, because I was coming from a place in the north of England where everyone's kind of quite warm and open and friendly, and sort of plonked into very kind of conservative, more of a kind of like a capitalist kind of everything's
the
about.
Emperor card, the Queen of Swords, more.
Yeah, for sure. With the south of England is just a little bit more focused on, material accomplishments and those kinds of things, because there's more opportunity for that, really. And there's less need to be worrying about the other things because they're taken care of, right? So
right.
So it was a difficult transition for me to go through that. That made me feel a little bit alienated, which is kind of typical, really, I think, of Pisces. We can feel like we don't quite, we didn't want to really be out there in public. There should be a special comfy kind of place where we can all just hang out and
the
just
bottom of the ocean,
yeah.
I guess, or something.
In the octopus's garden.
Exactly. There we go. I could have thought of that, but I didn't. I don't know how. So you made the cultural shift. I mean, were you raised with a religious kind of thought process, or were they atheistic more, or how what was the information coming into your little head about what is reality?
Oh, what is reality was very, very Saturnian, very Capricornian. And it's a really, really interesting topic right now, especially with Mercury going into Pisces literally as we make this. It's like, what even is reality? But in terms of what is presented to us as the culturally accepted norm, if we're looking at reality from that point of view, then it was very much, work, Capricorn, acquire the house, the garden, the dog, the kids, the da-da-da-da. And then you've made it. You are a success in life. And that just didn't sit really well with me from a very early age. It's like, what, really? That's what.
So you were just naturally countercultural, basically.
Well, it just didn't seem to make sense to me, because it's kind of like, well, what's the point in that? Like, what is the point? And this is the question that we ask with Pisces. What is the point? What are we here for? What's the meaning to all of this? Pisces tries to ascribe a meaning to things. And so, yeah, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But I didn't have a particularly strong sense of self. And this has been part of my journey and still is, really. So I just kind of conformed, this is the thing with the mutable signs, of which Pisces is one. We do mutate. We will just, morph ourselves into fitting into whatever container we have been placed within.
The shadow potentially also of going with the flow. It's just like, I'll go along to get along. We're gonna make it. It's not quite Libra stuff, but it's like, all right, I'll go where the least path of resistance is, probably kind of vibes more.
Yeah, it's like there's no stability, there's no fixity to who I am and what I am. So if something provides that, it kind of feels like a reassurance and a safety. But there's the shadow side of being kept safe, is actually that you're being restricted from growing and discovering anything else.
Oof, I hear that one loud and clear. Unfortunately, it's like, oh yes, comfort zones are helpful to a point. So when you went down there, you were 12. I mean, what was the music scene like? What was culturally kind of going on? Were you aware? I mean, I don't know if it was like a Beatles era or Zeppelin or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, my astrological twin is Kurt Cobain, which is a bit tragic.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm a I was born in the mid-70s, so I was doing the whole Pearl Jam, grunge, Nirvana thing, but also
the flannels, the
sorry.
kilts from the flannel, the American kilt, I guess.
Yeah, there was a bit of kilt wearing with Dr. Martens and all of that good stuff. Yeah, I mean, Eddie Vedder was like, my absolute hero. Still is, actually. He's a great guy. But yeah, so lots and lots and lots of music. This is a Piscean thing, right? It's a Neptunian thing. That we love music and anything creative and anything really that helps us to communicate on a soul level. That's what music does, right? It doesn't matter what language anyone in the world speaks. This one piece of music can unite everyone's emotions in the same way. So it's this very special soul level language. So I adore music. So lots of different things. I'm Gemini moon, I'm Gemini south node. So variety is the spice of life, as you know, Jim, being a double Gemini.
That I do. Well, it's funny. Okay, so I mean, I'm 37 now, so I mean, I grew up on the kind of tail end of grunge, but I get it. Rage Against the Machine, all that stuff. It depends because early night, it's so much shit happened in like 5 years between like 90, we'll say 92, 91, like Pearl Jam, all that stuff was kind of popping around then. And by the end of the millennium, it's like Daft Punk, Eminem, or the right at the 99, not the end of the millennium. That was the end of the millennium. In any event, lots of weird shit happening. So you were acquiring culture like everybody, I guess, in a kind of questioning the Emperor card way. Like it seems like grunge was kind of an answer to conformity in some way. So I'm just trying to kind of piece together, when did you start getting into astrology and magic and tarot and all that stuff?
Well, I would call the moon my particular gateway drug into the world of astrology. And it is for many people in actual fact. So around about 14, like my Saturn opposition, I went through a period of having really, really serious insomnia. And there seemed to be a pattern to it. And this is essentially all astrology is like working out these patterns. And I finally twigged that, it was every time there was a full moon, I just couldn't sleep for like 3 nights straight. And my Gemini moon and my Gemini south node just wanted to work out, well, why is this? I also coincidentally have Pallas Athena, the asteroid Pallas, on my sun, conjunct my sun, and that's known as the astrologer's asteroid, because it gets really, really good at working out patterns of things and working out things. So I just worked out this pattern that it was coming up with the full moon, and then that made me really, really interested in the moon and the sky and more mysterious things. And I had a real affinity for it. But unfortunately, I didn't credit it as being, something that was proper. It's like, this is something
doable. This is just a hobby kind of thing. I mean, that's how the culture definitely looked at astrology largely back in the 90s. I mean, now it's kind of like people are realizing what it is and being, more or less, millennials, Gen Zers or whatever, like, yes, TikTok, all this shit. But back then, I don't know. I think people were more aware.
The internet. So,
exactly. It was like maybe newspapers said your sun sign, but it's like, that's not astrology, as you know, that's like the tip of the iceberg, the icing on the cake, not the meat of the thing. So you started kind of grokking it naturally. Was there a point at which you were like, oh, I mean, it might be later on, but like, what were you trying? Okay, so astrology is one informer. What were some of the other informers in your worldview? Were you like, all right, I think I was this in a past life, so I'm going to go to India? Or like, how are you processing reality? There's no wrong answer, obviously.
No. I mean, I think life will ultimately push you in a way. I mean, it's when you're talking to an astrologer, obviously we use astrology to kind of like give context to everything essentially. And my life path as a Scorpio rising is one of a continuous regenerative process of going through crisis and being the phoenix that rises from the ashes. And there's been, lots of challenging times in my life where I've had to do that, like literally just like burn it down and start again, essentially, but come out stronger and clearer.
How
So
alchemical.
yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Alchemy. Yeah. And so you have these experiences in life, and you go, there's something about Pluto and Scorpio energy that just knows there's something more, there's something hidden here, there's something under the surface. And so I was never really into just taking things at surface level, face value,
Right.
essentially. It's like, nah, come on, what's behind that? Like, where's the
So
root?
you're talking about Scorpio, Alexandra, just that I understand it correctly. Which is your Scorpio aspect? Because I know many are sharing the Pluto Scorpio aspect as a generational theme, but probably in
Yeah,
your
She's
well,
case,
Pluto
it's
and
other.
Libra. She's
I
gonna kill you,
am.
Raphael. Not kidding.
I'm Scorpio rising, so my ascendant is Scorpio. I also have Moon and South Node in the 8th house, and the 8th house carries quite a Scorpio vibe to it. And I've got some pretty strong placements to Pluto in my chart as well. So there's a lot of Pluto. I'm kind of like Pluto and Neptune, which is a pet project I want to do sometime, because can I just say about this while it's in my
Yeah,
head?
sure, yeah.
Um,
We don't lose it.
so talking about depth and wanting to get like really, really deep with things, like Pluto is the one that tends to typically want to get right into like finding out, like, doesn't matter what horror show is down there. It's like, I want to get into the roots. Because it's the furthest out into space, all right? So it's right at the end of the solar system as we know it. It's the furthest out. So the deeper a planet is in space, the deeper within you it has an effect. But from time to time, actually, the orbit of Neptune and Pluto cross, so that Neptune, for very, very short occasional periods of time, is actually further out into space than Pluto from the sun.
I did not know that. How
Yeah,
often is that cycle? Like every
not
200 years or
very.
something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's like a group of people around the 80s, and I'd love to do a project sometime working out like what's the difference in that particular group of people. Like these two planets must come through in a
I'm
slight.
gonna harangue you about this project, so don't think I'll let it slide. I'm gonna be like, yo, get on it. Because psychological, like psychoanalysis of kind of the manifestations of these things is one of the things that I think is so powerful about astrology, which you've read my chart before, and I was kind of ripping through some life events haphazardly, and you made a lot of sense of them. I wouldn't say it was, how would I put it? I was convinced, but people have to get readings to kind of get the gist. But it felt like, when the shoe fits kind of thing. It didn't feel like I was forcing it. It was like, oh, this crazy weird event happened, and these are the circumstances, and you made a lot of sense of it. What part of the 80s, like who would that be affecting?
Do you know, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it's like 20 years, but yeah, it's
All
definitely
right.
a project that I will focus on at some point, because it's like
The great white sharks.
I've lived through this time, this is really important. It's crazy things, like when you think of our souls, which is what we're talking about with Pluto and Neptune. We're talking soul level. We're talking about beyond this particular incarnation.
Transpersonal kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really deep. It goes beyond this lifetime, and so you're dealing with aspects of yourself that it takes a long, long time to get to know, who you are through life, and to recognize these little hidden things of you that you just get these tiny, teeny little glimpses of. But when you come into the big transits, you see, Jim, you're on the cusp. You see, when Pluto goes into Aquarius, very, very soon, you're going to start your Pluto square. And
Oh joy.
and then it's going to be good.
I hope. I'm so somber and serious these days, and like much more jaded and dark than I have been for probably my whole life. So I don't know what to expect, but I will obviously be inquiring about that kind of stuff with you kind of often. I want to get to the astrology and stuff, so let's just kind of rip ahead a little bit. Like, okay, you grew up in the kind of grunge stuff, you were in the scene to whatever extent. Were you smoking weed and tripping and stuff, or were you like a sober clam? How did you deal with consciousness alterations as a Neptunian, kind of Plutonian?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things with Pisces energy. It's unboundaried. Okay, it's incredibly receptive. because we're talking about before, it not really having a form and it taking on the form of whatever is around it. It's because it's known for having a lack of boundaries.
I tend to equate it to watercoloring. It's like everybody else is like oil painting, and then Pisces is like watercolor, where it's got form but not exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I get you. And so if you think of the glyph of Pisces, like a quick Pisces lecture, you have two fish and they're swimming in opposite directions, but they're tethered together. And so Pisces, it's the last month of the astrological year before we hit the equinox and we start the new year again. So it's endings, it's finishing up. And it's where we are most aware of the fact that we have a spiritual side to us. We're not just the meat suit, right? The meat suit belongs in Aries, where our spirit enters the body of the human form and we become this human being. And so Pisces knows there's this horrible limitation of being in the human 3D incarnate kind of space. It's like it knows I am of source, I am of God, I am limitless being of, complete oneness with all of the universe.
I am he as you are me, and we are all together kind of vibes.
Yeah.
It's the big melting pot at the end of the rainbow or whatever.
Yeah. So it knows, there's a knowing of that. And we all have Pisces in our chart. This isn't just about Pisces. We're all 12 signs. But it's trapped. It's like it's encased in this body that just says, wow, hang on a second there, young lady. There's limits. And so there's this frustration, there's a real challenge around having to face the 3D reality of life and all of the limitations that we have. So there's a need to want to escape from that. Pisces ruled by Neptune as well as Jupiter, and Neptune is considered to be the higher octave of Venus.
Right.
So it's why it's so creative. But it's unconditional love. And so there's a naivety to Pisces that can end up being a victim, in that it just assumes that everyone understands that we're all connected and we should all really just love each other, right? And then we get punked on Earth, especially at this time. And it's like, oh, fuck, like no one actually, this really
the roses have thorns. What the fuck?
Yeah, what the fuck? Yeah. I got screwed over somewhere here. It's like
I took the wrong turn. Why am I here?
Yeah. So I have to get home. And how we do that is we bypass reality, we escape reality. So we get high and we drink and we meditate and all kinds of different ways that people escape reality just to feel, because it's just hard and seems to be getting harder.
I mean, in the positive polarity of that, it's lubrication for life. It's a real raw deal, and it's like lube doesn't hurt sometimes. So there's a place for it, I guess. But then I think Pisces, my Mars and Mercury are in 12th house, depending on what system we use. And so rambling and drug use, and I don't even want to get into my shit, but I don't think
to answer your question, yes, I took drugs from an early
dabbled.
age. Yeah, it was the rave scene as well, like house music was a big thing, and we were still like having the illegal raves and getting text messages on the very very earliest of mobile phones, a Nokia brick.
Oh, I know those, I'm aware.
There was no Google Maps.
Oh no, that was the funniest thing, printing out like MapQuest or whatever. I mean, like, all right, how do I get there?
Yeah,
like you're right on the edge, but there's people, I mean, there's a time when people like had to use straight up maps, like a real map. Yeah, and I'm like, no thank you, that's a little too much effort here. To deliver a pizza or something, it's like, good luck, you've got to be like Robin Hood and know the whole woods or whatever.
But so somehow all of these convoys of vehicles filled with people on mushrooms and ecstasy was like managing to have a really amazingly good time and not cause any problems to anyone. Like it was just about love of music and the feeling of being in that space with other people and just forgetting about reality for a while and just celebrating the spirit of oneness and love that, like that was what it was all about, essentially.
Yeah, heaven on earth, kind of. Heaven is a place on earth. It's like, it is a drug infested rave, is one of the more heavenly realms you can manifest here, I would say. I've been to a few, not many, and only on acid, really.
Well, that's a whole different ball game, I think.
Probably.
Yeah, but that's really what the early 90s was all about. Really, it was kind of like, I think it was the last time it was really real. Like, it felt like, to me anyway, it feels like that was when shit was really, really real, because, and this is interesting, with Saturn just finishing up. Sorry, I'm going to bring everything back to astrology.
No, always go anywhere you want with this. That's the point.
With
we go down rabbit holes.
All right. Well, with Saturn just finishing up in Aquarius, like, this has been the Saturn return of the internet, of the World Wide Web. Like, the World Wide Web was created 30 years ago. And so I was a teenager when it came out, when it was first in its like infancy. And so the Saturn return typically happens to people between age 28 and 30, when you're really like, life is saying, right, you're grown up now, right? Like, you can.
The speed bump. It's the border patrol. They're like, "Where's your ID? Are you supposed to be here? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing?" Kind of.
Yeah, the fun times, like, that you actually have to do some work and you have to have some responsibilities and da da da. So when we have these Saturn cycles, it's like the karmic consequences. It's like, here you go. So we've gone through the Saturn return of the World Wide Web in the last couple of years, and we've had this, we realize now that what we didn't realize at the time was, if you put something on the internet, it's there forever. It's like, there's consequences to this shit. And so now Saturn is saying, oh, okay, right, we need police, we need fact checkers, and we need, all these regulations about what you can say, what you can't say, and we're struggling to find our way with an appropriate level of policing, I would say, or respect for this incredible technology that, it's easy to forget, it's not really been around that long, but now it's completely dominating life. We've allowed it to dominate life before we've even really got to grips with it, I think.
Totally. I know it's in a Marshall McLuhan kind of sense, it's like an externalization of our neurological systems. So that's why we're in a kind of age of anxiety, because we're starting to see who we really are, whether it's, Pixar's Inside Out or psychoanalysis kind of being popular, and psychedelics and astrology. The internet makes it very accessible. But then you get like, oh, you need 3 identifications to prove you're who you are. And I mean, there's a lot of gatekeeping, even tonight with all the technology. It's like, Jesus Christ. So, yeah, we can keep talking about astrology. I know you want to shift there, and I don't mind. I'm just trying to get in all the life, like the highlights. Raphael, did you want to say something?
Okay, so the highlights go like this. I'll give you the.
Here we go. Drive-by shooting. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I conform. I'm a Pisces with a poor sense of self, and I try and do the right thing. And so I just do the norm, right? I marry a guy. I go to university, I get a job in financial services, I work in banking, and it's all quite hideous. It's all very soul crushing. But I don't really understand that concept. My upbringing was very much I went to a Church of England school. We went to church on a Sunday, Christian church on a Sunday, go to Sunday school, all that kind of jazz.
Check the boxes kind of thing. Yeah,
which to me just felt like
inauthentic.
Inauthentic, but also I have, spidey senses and Scorpio go along, and I just found that the more props something needs to prop it up, then the more weak it is. So when there has to be like fancy dress costumes and judges wear certain outfits and religious people wear certain outfits and all of this, it's all kind of like, well, you shouldn't need any of that. Like, the integrity of what the message that you need to put out into the world should speak for itself if it's strong enough. This is what Saturn tries to do. It tries to create integrity and make things strong and lasting. And so immediately it struck me as like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here. That's
pomp and circumstance, a lot of pageantry.
Yeah, exactly.
Culture's weird like that.
And a lot
I mean,
of
even the flannel shirts
brainwashing.
were a fucking outfit. You know, it's like nobody's guilt free of this. Like Hare Krishnas have a uniform or whatever, right? So it's like, okay, it goes every which way. Monkeys, we're monkeys, strange monkeys, are we? Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
Yeah, and so but a lot of the like the brain, I'm very sensitive to words. My Gemini moon, my Gemini south node in the 8th house. I'm kind of sensitive to words and the power of words, the power of information. And the whole like being given a sheet of words that you have to say when the guy says something and you have to say it back to them, and so this is just like brainwashing. It is. So it never really sat well with me. It never seemed to be particularly authentic. It certainly isn't something that I see, you know, like people walking their talk that are going to church in my personal experience. So I was just kind of like, well, you know, none of this really makes sense to me. Life didn't really make sense for a very, very long time. So I just went with the flow, as you say, shadow side of Pisces, I'll just go along. And then basically I got very, very ill because I got very stressed, like the pressure of working in financial services just as Pluto was coming through Sagittarius around the time of the 9/11, the Twin Towers attack and things like this. And there was this huge bubble in financial services that was, you know, expanding and expanding. And then there was a huge crash. And that's where I crashed too, because it was like the pressure of like unethical behavior for me personally that I found that I was pressured to be a part of in the given job, was just creating so much internal pressure in me that I just kind of exploded. And I ended up actually, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I still do, actually.
My mom has that, or had that at one point. So I've heard of it. I get it.
It's just like everything has to stop. The outside world has to stop. And I was bedbound. I was in bed mostly for about 3 years. This was my Pluto square, actually, Jim.
Oh joy. See, I told you, I was like, I don't know, man, but I don't know. Squares aren't fun. I mean, I get you can launch, but it's like it's through an atmosphere still or whatever. Anyway, so you had 3 years bedbound.
Yeah, bedbound, like no TV. I couldn't read, I couldn't have light, I couldn't
Kurt Cobain mode, fully engaged, minus the guitar.
And it's like, so there is you and your thoughts and all of your shit, and you are going to stew in it, and you cannot distract yourself from it. That's it. You can't move, you can't do anything. And so that's gonna force like the mother of all dark nights of the soul on you, which it did. And that was wonderful on the other side of it, because I was just like, you know, I worked a lot of stuff out about myself. I worked a lot of stuff out about astrology and the need that we have to have a meaning to our life. Like, it's really important. And I considered all of the things that people use to give meaning to their life, and how to lots of people that's enough, but to me it wasn't enough and I needed more. So that's really where I started my journey with astrology. And I discovered actually through Facebook that I had an auntie who I hadn't seen since I was 2 years old, didn't remember her. Anyway, she's other side of the world in Tasmania. She was an astrologer though her whole life, and I didn't even know, and she's written many books. And we reconnected, and thankfully that was enough to give me almost like permission, like some validation that actually this can be a way of life. She'd lectured in university on astrology, and it really just gave me you know, the thumbs up to say, actually, not all grown-ups think that this is not quite right, you know.
That's what's up. What's her name? Just out of curiosity. I mean, are we allowed to know who this author is?
Her name is Linda Reed. She's about to have her Uranus return. She's in her mid-80s and still, like, I mean, she's retired now, but you know, I'm still really, I'm sorry?
Still kicking. She's still here.
Kicking, yeah. And I have her books, and it's beautiful, and it's very validating because, you know, I have Aquarius fourth house, so I've always been black sheep of the family kind of thing. So it was really, really nice to be able to reconnect with her. So that happened, and you know, these synchronicities just all show up around the same time. And then, like, when you start getting validating events of the astrology, when you start getting really deep into it, and you get like things in real life like validate it, you're just like, that's it. There's no denying that this is a thing. And I
You're
love
lucky
it
you're not a
so
Gemini.
much.
You're not. I mean, you have the Gemini moon, but overthinking it, you can be like, yes, but, yes, but. I don't know if Pisces struggle with that. Maybe you're just like, yes, and more, all of it, yay.
I
But
think
yeah,
no,
like
I'm
synchronicities. I'll
really
see the clock, it's
skeptical.
11:11, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Like I'm jaded to it now. It's like I'm not like, oh, an angel number. You know, I'm not there right now personally. I'm not saying it's not true, but
No, I mean,
it's a weird mode.
it gets lumped in with a lot of that more woo kind of stuff, but it's just so precise. And what Gemini loves, as I'm sure you know, is precision. It's like Sagittarius, the Jupiter realm, which is like the opposite to Gemini, that's all just like, oh, I just believe, I just know, you know, this is my philosophy, you know, there is a God. It's like, we'll prove it. No one can prove there's a God, right? But half the world believe in that. Like most of the world probably believe there's a God. It's like, we'll prove it, and they can't. Gemini needs like, show the workings out, show me the instruction book, like tell me how this works. I need to know the nitty gritty. And so, and combined with Pluto that wants to get underneath the surface of things, you know, I would never kind of like consider this credit, you know, I wouldn't give it credit if it didn't really, really stack up.
I
It's
hear you
just
a
so
thousand percent.
precise.
No, I mean, yeah, it's like it's one of those things where I mean, if you have eyes to see, you see it. I'm not a doubter at this point. It's just like, what does it mean? I guess is the best way sometimes, because some psychedelics really help. Actually, because you'll be like, oh my gosh, I see it all. But I haven't tripped in a while, and I don't smoke or drink right now, so no lubrication. So I'm a little like, whatever. But even today, I was reading something, and I was like, oh, we've had a master mason on that's a DJ that I met, and he came on, and I was like, oh, I should talk to him again as I word the word Mason, like, but it wasn't about Freemasons. It was like something, you know, the masonry was falling down or whatever in the book, and I was like, okay, say six. It's just like, well,
That's it.
interesting. Maybe I should hit him up. Yeah. All right. So, am I tripping, or did you not literally? Clearly. Am I wrong in assuming that you've been to India, or you were initiated into some kind of lineage, or how? What's up with that?
No, that's not me, lovely. I'm
Well,
nothing
then
to
I am wrong, wrong, wrong. I don't know why. Maybe all the Sri Lanka stuff, and I was like,
love
oh, she totally
curry.
gets this culture. Yeah, curry's dope. I love it. Green curry, red curry. All right, screw that. I haven't even been to India. I guess you haven't either. So one day, but
I haven't, but and actually I have Saturn in my ninth house, so long distance travel has been a struggle for me in
limited. Yeah,
my life. But
whole lot of.
I'm hoping to become an immigrant very soon, and go and live in distant shores.
I had said in the little intro, Portugal. Like, is that a hope or like like how would I put it? Are you like I want to go buy land there, or are you more like I want to go visit and see what's anything other than England? Like, what's your mode?
There is a little bit of anything other than England right now, I have to say. Things aren't
Right.
they're not moving in a direction that I feel is representative of what I would want from a home space, put it that way.
Right.
I'm a big fan of nature and of natural rhythms and cycles, which is what astrology taps into perfectly. And I find that the more time I spend in nature, the healthier and happier as a person I am. And the disconnect that we have from nature in so many ways, in ways that people aren't even aware of, just our calendar and how our culture is just so counter natural. It's just not natural. We don't naturally have New Year in the middle of Capricorn, and you know, it's just crazy things. So I want to live more in sync with nature and natural rhythms. I struggle with too much of the digital realm, and things really are progressing quite rapidly now over here, down that kind of digital AI road.
Totally, we're well aware of it. Chat GPT and everything. It's like we are entering new turf here. It seems with Pluto entering Aquarius, a lot of transformation through the sciences or whatever. All right, so I guess we got a good drive-by of who you are. So tell us about, I mean, anything you want to talk about. The conch is yours if you wanted to address specific, aspects of today.
What's your journey with astrology? Because you kind of haven't you hopped off the bus a little bit along with giving up the drugs and stuff for a while.
I mean, I'm sure you could look at my chart and understand why. I was all gung-ho about a lot of things for a few years. I mean, even like in Australia, we started the podcast kind of more. That was right at the Pluto-Saturn conjunction in 2020. And then I got back to America and it was like COVID and that kind of shut some stuff down. Got engaged to a Brit, but didn't meet her. You know, that whole scene. It was just levels of fingers being slammed to the door. It's how it feels like constantly. So it's like if I reach for something, it's just like nope, no. And it's like I wasn't even, it's like, isn't this normal? So I've given I'm trying to think. I've done more some tarot readings lately and oracle card stuff, not so much astrology. I think what hit me at one point, probably in 2021, ironically, my fiance at the time, who was a Scorpio rising as well, Mars and Scorpio, all sorts of weird shit. She Scorpio moon, yeah, a lot of fun. Her Venus or my Venus was conjunct her Pluto, I think.
Oh,
it was not fun.
Yeah,
and I'm still kind of like, what the fuck, even though I moved on. But so I got a reading from somebody who was on the podcast, Maru Matu, at one point, and she was doing a draconic chart, and I just started pulling back Gemini mode, and I was like, so I already know there's Egyptian and Chinese and Mayan, and like there's all these filters through which we can perceive reality. They're real, but are they true? And I just started kind of getting jaded at that level where I'm like, anybody can kind of take a song and make a world out of it, which is one of the beautiful things of the human mind and imagination and capacity. But we can get very invested in Tiger Woods and golf. It's like golf is a simulated reality. You see what I mean? It's like it's not true ultimately. In some sense, it might reflect levels of reality. You see what I'm saying? So it's not that I got turned off. I think I just overdosed on it, and I didn't. Yeah, I didn't really get initiated properly. It was more just like a cornucopia of stuff. Like Raphael, I mean, he was a large part of this, and I'm not even complaining, but it was like, oh my gosh, Bashar and channeling. Oh my gosh, Carl Jung. Oh my gosh, Terrence McKenna. Oh my gosh, LSD. Oh my gosh, astrology. Oh my gosh, tarot. Oh my gosh, alchemy. It's like all at once. And at some point, I was just like, I don't know who I am. I know a lot of ideas. I have my fingers in a lot of pies, but I don't feel like I'm getting fed. So I've kind of just like backed off a few things. But astrology can't go away. Like it's one of those things. I don't feel actually qualified enough. I think I'm good as a beginner. Like I can make intro to astrology fun for people, and I think that's about it. But people like you, Gemini, Brett, if we've had some professional astrologers on Kaipacha, it's like I haven't read all this stuff. I couldn't get into it. I can retain it, like certain data, sure, but then it's like I don't see it as the whole story the way you do, particularly. So that was a long-winded bullshit answer, but it's like I love astrology. It's not it's real. But then I'm just also like, what does that mean? How do I apprehend it? I mean, money's real.
I would say like the best way to do it is to look back, because
you helped me with that actually. That's when it started like we talked 2 or 3 months ago, I think. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I was just listing off whatever, like my first sexual encounter. Oh, my voice cracked during that. Great. My first sexual encounter kind of thing, or, the breakup or any of these things. My mental health, I went nuts at one point. And you were the taxonomy of what you were doing to it was so readily apparent that I didn't feel like I could deny it at that. It's like, all right, look, I can overthink this maybe, but I can't deny this. So it's real, folks.
It
like
is,
it or not.
Is real, and this is the thing, I never bother really wasting my energy trying to convince anyone of it, because you can't. It's like you'll experience it if your soul needs it. And that's it, essentially. Like whatever our soul's growth objective in this particular incarnation is, one way or another, it will take you there, right? You're going to find the answers to whatever is the puzzle that you're working on. And for me, in this particular incarnation, not only is astrology wonderful for me to work out my own shit, but I just love helping other people. And I love empowering people, because I have like, my sun is my skipped step, as they call it in evolutionary astrology. So it just means that I'm really, really having to work on my sense of self. And so I'm really into trying to empower other people, because I've become very aware of how I have been disempowered. And this is literally the most empowering tool, because we're so totally nuanced. Like there's 8 billion people on the planet, or however many there are, and we're all totally different. And there isn't another single kind of approach to making some sense of all of this chaos that is our life, that approaches people as unique individuals and says, well, yeah, I mean, even twins will have a different birth chart. Their ascendant is going to be different. The moon could change signs. No two birth charts are the same. It's the only thing that's really going to speak to you as an absolute unique individual and give you the guidance that you need for that. So it's massively empowering. And I feel
so I have one or two questions that are random, and if Rafa, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, obviously. So do you look at these as perennial philosophies, like eternal truths, like we're Cro-Magnons dealing with Aries and Aquarius energy, or is this a projection of where consciousness is at for our species now, where we're playing with, the tool is shaping the people, shaping the tool? Is it a feedback loop kind of thing? That doesn't make it less true, but it's like, how do you see what I'm saying? Sometimes I wonder that. It's like, all right, was Jupiter, because
I mean, so
it depends on presuppositions. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there would be two sides to that. One is the idea of truth, which is the Sagittarian, Jupiterian kind of concept. The Sagittarius is the truth seeker. Like, I want to know what it's all about. Like, what are we all here for and stuff. And the first thing I would say about Sagittarius is it's a mutable sign, right? It's a sign. The mutable signs are signs that want to change. Like the fixed signs stay the same. Cardinal signs make something happen. Mutable signs, that's choppy changey. So truth then is not, truth is a process. Truth is a journey, which is another part of Jupiter, this long distance travel and taking a broader perspective on things. So truth is not, when you've come to a conclusion, this is a fact, this is a truth, you stopped the process of learning. And I think that comes from our ego. It's it's like a conclusion is the end of learning. It's just saying, I know enough now, that's it. I don't need to know anything more. And that's not really in the spirit of the expansive quality of Jupiter or the mutability of Sagittarius or Pisces. They're like, oh, hang on a second, maybe there's more. Maybe I don't know it all right now. Maybe the more I know, the more I am aware that I don't know, actually, and I need to just keep going. And the more I go, the more there is to know. And then you go into overwhelm like you did with astrology.
Yeah, the map just became too broad, and there was too many maps overlapping where I was like, I don't know how helpful this is. And it was just where I was at. I mean, there was a whole lot of things going on. So it wasn't so much astrology failed me. It was more like, wow, if you listen to 12-tone music, it's hard to pick out the tune, or whatever. It's like that. It was just an overload of data, and I was just like, all right, I gotta kind of fast a little, more or less.
That's what Gemini can do, because like I said, Gemini sits opposite Sag, and Gemini's like, right, give me the details, give me the facts, give me the figures, give me the data.
The true or false. Black and white thinking. Yeah.
If I get enough information, if I read enough books, if I know enough stuff, then I will have the answers, then I will have the truth. And it's like, no, you've got to do something with the information. You have to go out there into life and have an adventure and explore and test it out and see if that piece of information that you've read or looked at on TikTok or wherever is something that isn't happening.
I don't TikTok, for the record. I don't know if you do. It's like, that shit's too weird for me, but we probably should.
Yeah.
Because of, it's in vogue, kids. We're missing out on the new Pearl Jam. What the fuck are we doing?
I know, right? No, I mean, it's just short attention span stuff, and I think that's a dangerous road to go down, to be honest. I'd rather keep my brain as open as possible rather than
Completely agree, Alexandra. However, I also want to say, because I recently had this talk with another friend, and they were like, yeah, you should go there and so on. And my friend was like, what? And then this coach friend of his said something like, yeah, don't you know, 90% of my customers or whatever are now from TikTok. And because one would think, oh, it's only, people with goldfish attention spans, and that may be a large part of it, especially also because, as you may know, in China, they're actually showing teenagers at science fairs and stuff like that. So there they weigh the algorithm completely differently. So it's also kind of a deliberate cultural subversion attack, let's say. But I just want to point out that to anyone who feels somehow attracted to it, everyone who does more interesting, in-depth content that would make you self-empowered or just think critically about anything are actually really those that, in a way, including us, Jim, actually, should get on there. Not to post 2-hour things, which you can't do anyways, but even just to access, because you never know who finds the portal where. And those who really want to know, probably they will go on more underground platforms like Odyssey and so on, and find long videos about anything. But still, just as an alternate perspective, I think it can also be interesting, and some of the also important or new topics get spread on TikTok as well. So just to put it neutrally, I'm also more like, but actually can be seen in a different way. And I have a question for you though also, which is, I also, from all, whether astrology, human design, gene keys, there's a million systems, and many of them I find are incredibly accurate. But then I also often think of, especially also in relation to tarot, even if for whatever reason they later turn out not to be so accurate, or to say it more accurately, my definition of whatever I read is changing, because every symbol in itself can be seen as holographic as well, and can be seen from a completely different perspective. So it may even appear after 10 years looking at my chart, I have a completely different interpretation of it than when I first saw it. Yeah. So there's this holographic aspect. And then also the idea that even however this definition may change, it's even just, I think, well worth to just understand tarot archetypes or zodiacal archetypes and planetary archetypes, even just to understand, just like you said, what all these energies that are in play, and also just to get a feeling, just like you said, for how individual everyone is, although there are generic patterns, but there is such a great individuality, and just learning about it, no matter how correct I then define a chart to be or whatever it may be, just understanding about it, I think, is incredibly helpful to just for imagination and to be able to deal and interpret and understand situations. Can you catch my drift?
I completely catch your drift, and that's a very Jupiterian concept, really. It's like, can we expand outside of this and say, there really is no, you don't know something until you've explored it more deeply and more fully and from different ways. And the passage of time is what will do that. Your life will just do that. So like you say, you're going to have a different perspective on something in your chart, 10 years later. And there are charts that capture that growth as well. You have your progressed chart, and there isn't just this natal chart and that's it, and that's how you're going to be all your life kind of thing. Because
how do you interpret progressed charts compared to natal? Like that's one of the elements that made me struggle. It's like, oh shit, I'm a progressed Virgo rising with I'm a Leo now for the next 25 years.
It's just a layer on top. It's kind of like,
is it almost like icing on a new cupcake? The cupcake doesn't change, the icing kind of shifts, or how do you kind of look at it?
That's a really good analogy, actually. Yeah, that's basically it. So the easiest one, the one that when we will feel the most, is the moon. So when your progressed moon changes sign, so ordinarily the moon will move through one sign every two and a half days. And so in your progressed chart, you spend 2.5 years. We swap a day for a year. So you would look at your natal chart, and then you look at your progressions as well. And you're finding where there's like a collection of energy. Essentially what an astrologer is doing is they're looking at your natal chart, and then they're adding in the transits, and then they're adding in progressions, and then they're adding in all manner of different kinds of techniques that we use. And where things start to shape up a theme, that's how we can, start to get predictive. But just going back to an earlier point, I think how these things can become overwhelming is when we're not sure of our expectations of them. It's like, what are we looking to this thing as? Am I approaching tarot or Kabbalah or astrology or religion or whatever, any of these things? Am I approaching that as this is the answer that's going to fix everything in my world that's not right? I think subconsciously that's what we're doing a lot of the time. You know, it's kind of like, you know, what am I doing here? And this will give
gives
me the
cohesion to the narrative. I mean, like you were saying, we have to have, it seems fundamental. I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson's old psychology classes with my Nana. And it's like, we're embedded in narrative, like no matter how you cut it. So archetypes are driving us and we embody story, and you can't really get, even if you're a material scientist, reductionist or whatever, you know, an atheist, you're still embedded in a story of how things are and stuff. I just realized my progressive moon is in Scorpio, and I'm like, of course I'm like not having a fun time, really. Sorry,
it's
Scorpio.
preparing you for your Pluto square, Jim.
Oh, I'm like, we'll talk at some point about this. It's like, I think I'm doing good. Like, it feels like how would I put it? It feels like a city was built and I've dug under the city. I don't want to destroy the city, but I'm like redoing the foundations, which is just a weird way to put it. But it's like, whatever comes out of this, I'm happy about. It'll be serious. It's serious. That's the best way to put it. Anyway, I don't know. I just kind of blew up my brain. I was like, did we answer? Did he ask you a question? Did I? Who? I don't. Okay, it's like spin the bottle here. It's like,
I think where we were going with the kind of like there is the short attention span thing that is prevalent in society. I hesitate. I see myself as an ambassador in a way for my chosen profession, which is astrology. And so I want to do it the best service that I can, because I really think that it's just so empowering and so helpful to so many people. And in my clients' lives, I see how much support it gives them that nothing else comes close to. So I want to be a strong ambassador for that. And you can't fit that into, you know, however many you know, characters you're allowed on Twitter or whatever. It's very, very hard. Because people are just
well, like, I get disciples, right? So the prophet rambles, and the other guy writes down the bullet points, and then says, "Hey, check this shit out," or whatever.
The 10 Commandments, right? Yeah.
Right. Or yeah. It's tricky. It's tricky to navigate the waters, and not everyone's built for exactly the same. Obviously.
No.
Shit.
And we have our free will. You know, this is the thing. Like, our free will is meeting the influences. All these planets are doing is they're beaming a frequency at us. It's just an influence. It's not making anything happen. It's influencing things. And there's a limited range of potentialities of how that will play out. But that's dependent upon how you and your free will meet that influence. And that's not something that you can say, well, this is definitely going to happen. You're going to, you know, meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger on Thursday at 6 o'clock. It doesn't work like that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been deceived into thinking that that's what astrology is for, is just to say what's going to happen. Well, you're involved in that process. Otherwise, what would be the point in you? You know, what would be the point in being alive if you didn't have some say in it? So the future is being created by how we're meeting the present now, like how we're meeting the energies now is, you know, how we are determining, oh, okay, well, then when that happens to that, then we've got a better understanding of it. And that's why I was saying earlier, you know, if you look back on stuff that's happened, that's far easier to validate astrology and go, oh yeah, that was when you had your Saturn return. This happened. Oh, I see what happened there. You know, like just looking back over the Saturn transit through Aquarius that we've had through the pandemic. Saturn is restrictions, and it stress tests things, and it stress tested society. You know, the tribe of humanity is Aquarius. It's like, oh, we're all together, right? We've all got each other's backs, and Saturn's come along and it stress tested that idea. And so we've come to the end of Saturn in Aquarius and gone, shit, like we're not cohesive at all. We're anything but. We don't have each other's backs, and we're not all singing from the same hymn sheets. You know, there is there is diversity, but also there's been this huge limit on diversity. Aquarius represents, you know, what is unique about everyone. And I think it's made it very apparent that we've become homogenized. We have become duplicates, or there's been an attempt to just make us fit the machine, as it were. And people are crying out, like, to have some freedom from that and to just freely be their authentic selves. But because they've never had the opportunity to discover what that is, because we don't know about ourselves from a very, very young age, we're just taught this is what you have to be, rather than let's find out who you are and then celebrate that. It's more a case of, well, we don't really care. You need to fit the machine. You're going to be a ball bearing. Get on with it, you know. So we're seeing this kind of outpouring of, there's a desperate need for some kind of relevance, individual relevance. And it's going to extremes of like, okay, how do I feel different and unique to everyone else? And people are going to more and more and more extreme lengths all the time in terms of carving out something that's like just specific to them. So yeah, looking back on these transits and going, all right, what has the last 2.5 years or whatever has been, can be really helpful in terms of learning astrology, because it's just like, oh fuck yeah, I get it, wow, that's amazing. And those wow aha moments, that's when things really go deep. Tracks through all the limits. Yeah,
you definitely helped me with that when we went over my chart and just kind of random events in my life. You really did illuminate it. It didn't feel like I was hoping it would be true. It just felt like, oh, that's how all the dots connect. When you're in the present moment and looking forward, you don't really know the potential dots. Even if you're an astrologer, you don't, like, everyone's like, oh my God, Jupiter, Saturn conjunction, here it comes. And I don't think anybody had any clue we would have what went down happen necessarily, like the pandemic and all that. But in hindsight, it's like it fits like a glove, and holy shit.
Well, astrologers, we knew for a long time that this massive event was going to go down in March 2020. I mean, all of those planets lining up at the end of Capricorn. And we knew that kind of like the likelihood was that it would be about breaking apart the current top-down system, redistributing power in some way, like breaking it apart.
The world was going to change. Capricorn, right? Saturn, Pluto, change and transformation of the structures. The bones are going to melt. It's like in Harry Potter, the bone grow stuff. It's like, oh, they all shattered, but now we're going to go back, and that's not a comfortable process.
Let's show the shadow side of what's gone on here, but also let's unify the world in this massive mission that we have to just say, all right, can we just stop with this Capricornian desire to just exploit for material gain? I'm not saying that's what Capricorn's all about, but you know, in this context,
Emperor card season, or card on this episode,
yeah,
the Emperor he wants to fucking put a chessboard down and not have a jungle. I mean, he's about order, right, or whatever. There's a shadow to that. It's like, I'm going to kill all the animals and the plants, and I don't care. I want my yard or whatever.
Well, power corrupts, right?
Yeah.
And things, the thing about Capricorn and Saturn energy is Saturn likes things to stay the same. We've talked about reality, and Saturn essentially is what creates reality, because what Saturn says is keep things the same, keep doing that, keep things the way they've always been. It's strong. It stood the test of time for a reason, you know, don't change. And that's kind of like what reality is really essentially is just the widely accepted norm. Saturn normalizes things. Like it's like porn. Let's take porn for an example. You know, when I was growing up, like boys had a magazine or something, and it was so tame. And if you'd shown someone back then what young men are growing up with, or young women as well are growing up with now, they would be like, that's crazy, are you mad? But it's become normal because it's just been the widely accepted, it stood the test of time, you know, this is okay, we do this now. So Saturn has this effect of normalizing things that might otherwise be kind of shocking. So it's like, how do you boil a frog, right? You just do it really, you turn the temperature up really gently, and then it doesn't really notice. So, and that's the case with Capricorn and Saturn. It's like, these power dynamics have been in place for such a long time. We're all just okay with it. We're all a bit like, yeah, well, that's just the way things are. and we tolerate, we tolerate so much, and that's to our discredit a lot of the time, what we're capable of tolerating. Resilience.
You keep eyeing the chart. Is there something you want to tell us about right now?
No, it's just a force of habit.
Oh, okay, it's not a bad habit. Saturn in the house. It's like, this method works. These genes work. We're not going to mutate too much.
Yeah, so that collapse, and with Jupiter's involvement, that meant that it would be global.
Big time. Yeah, the big deal.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, look, can we just stop the whole freaking capitalist exploitation hierarchy bullshit? It's not working. It's not helping us. It's not where we need to go. We need to break this all apart and go, all right, let's start again. So it's like this defining moment. It's like, can we just draw a line under this shit show and come up with something better? Because Aquarius is like experimentation and genius and pushing the boundaries and progress and evolution and excitement and great ideas. So it's kind of like saying, look, let's break apart the old ways and come up with some really cool new ones. And so in 2023, with Pluto kind of hovering between the breaking apart of the old and the
I'm pessimistic about it. You're more optimistic sounding. I'm more like, oh, here comes the Terminators. And like, they'll not kill you if you have Bitcoin, I guess, or whatever.
And
it's like,
something
I'd
like to tie this into, because you said it's about the breaking down of the top-down structure. I completely agree. However, it almost appears as if it was also, let's say, the start of the end, in terms of that the structure once again tries to centralize even more, because now, from certain points of view, you talk about redistribution of power or wealth. Some could argue, oh, it's happening, but it's totally going to the top even stronger. But this could also just be the prelude to then the whole thing failing, and I don't know, the gold
solar
coins
flare
raining down, let's say. But I think you get.
Yeah, I hear you totally, and this is what I was talking to before. Astrologers knew this was coming up. This, for me, felt like a really great opportunity. It says this is a massive opportunity for all of the world just to get together. We were literally sent to our rooms to go and think about how we're behaving. Like, the world went into lockdown. Like, no one's doing anything. Everyone stop. We've got this wrong. Whoa, let's just start again, kind of thing. So that was a brilliant opportunity. And wherever Jupiter is, there's an opportunity. And even in Pluto, the Chinese word for crisis is opportunity as well, because there is, when something falls apart, then that's a wonderful opportunity to put it back together in a better way. So there is like a bit of a Piscean kind of optimism there, but how we've met that opportunity, to me, has been quite disillusioning, disappointing, because essentially we haven't really used that opportunity. Some people have used that opportunity. They've exploited that opportunity, and I don't think that's the people that I would have wanted to. A lot more power has gone into the hands of people that already had it, because they're the people who see the opportunities and exploit them, unfortunately.
Yes.
And we're too busy fighting about wearing fucking masks, right? It's like, it's really not the point. This is a story. This is just a storyline for something bigger in the background that's trying to happen. And we get caught up in the story and the theater of it. So the planets are trying to say, we've got our organization wrong. Let's organize ourselves better. But we just got caught up in the story of how that's happening. And then we lost the whole meaning behind it. And here we are with the consequences of that. That we're seeing around us, the consequences of taking vaccines, for example, because
which we're loudly against, largely. Raphael more so. I'm just ambivalent. And
No,
he helped
basically,
me not
what I kind of want to say, and one can always construe it that way, but what is possible to me is almost like the system or decentralization is overdoing itself. And I would agree. I would have wanted, 2 years ago, everyone stand up. We're done with this, BS fake government stuff and everything. Let's organize ourselves. Let's feed each other and be friendly, and and get out all the technologies and whatever that was sequestered, all the information, and we can live well from eating herbs from the forest or something, no problem. This didn't happen to a large extent, but I'm kind of wondering if that's not also part of the necessary process in the larger scheme, that only have a small fraction that's galvanizing and really getting more into it and understanding there is a point why they've maybe already before been strange or just waking up through that crisis, but that this is, and the rest is almost ossifying even more, centralizing even more. But this is just, how would you say it, the death throes or something, death woes or
Death
yeah.
throes, yeah, you got it.
So
yeah,
I would also prefer a different picture, but I think that this may well be, part of the larger process that ultimately will be very beneficial and maybe even more thorough, dare I say, than if it would have gone even smoother, which I prefer as a Libra, let's say, but
You didn't get your way, Raphael. It's like the emperor having no clothes. It's
it's
a lot easier when he's in his house with no clothes. Yeah, true. Okay, we're in your dream. I forgot. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I really hear you, Raphael. It is like, and I love the Libra kind of take on like looking at both sides of the coin, and actually perhaps it will end up being better in the long run. And as always, like time will tell. My at the center of my chart, I have the yin and the yang here, because essentially what we're aiming to do is balance, right? It's harmony and balance. And unfortunately for me, I feel like the current structure or the current normal way of life that we've created is so far out of balance. It's just ridiculously unhealthy. And I there's just so much unnecessary suffering in the world. Like, there doesn't need to be anyone starving. Like, how can we be okay with that? Like, this is not how can we consider that we are a successful species when literally like 1 or 2% of the world's population is in a refugee camp? This isn't working. If what we're working towards is something that we've all agreed upon, and I just don't think that we have. So Pluto in Aquarius is going to be extremely interesting. It's going to make some really interesting aspects as well on the journey. But for the rest of this year, essentially, we're in the death throes, like you say, Raphael, of kind of like the old thing is trying to cling on. The past is trying to cling on and say, no, you need to keep things the way they are. And, the men in suits need to run the world still. And then the Aquarius thing is like, oh yeah, but maybe we could replace that with something alternative, like
innovative,
artificial intelligence and the digital realm. And this is why I think it's very, very pertinent at this moment that Saturn is just finishing off, and it's really, really presenting us with, here's the consequences of AI. We've had the World Wide Web for 30 years. You've had it. Have you grown up? Has it learned to be self-regulating? Does it have any discipline? Does it have any boundaries? Is it humble? Is it, reliable? All of these things. And I think the answer is a big fat no. And yet we're about to go even further with it. And I think we're running before we can walk a little bit. So we
nothing against Kim Kardashian, but it's like when they're the world like influencing, it's a weird situation. I'm not even trying to pick on her, but it's like it's a birth pang, right? So it's like I've never had a child, obviously, but it's like it's not fun, but it's necessary. And it seems, because I try to keep that, that's the positive polarity of this all, where it's like this has to occur. It sounds like, in a weird way, it sounds like you're like, we're not learning, we don't have to do it this way. Sometimes I'm like, it's almost like what Raphael was saying, where it's like the more grotesquely obvious something is, like, what comes to mind is the Black Hole Sun music video, like where all their faces are stretching and shit. It's like, that's so bizarre and weird and off that it didn't have, it was subtle at first, but towards the end, it's like disturbing, essentially. And I think that's maybe the limit. Like I was saying earlier, it's like the emperor has no clothes in his like living room, and maybe his butler is like, oh, this is awkward. But when you get to the world stage and everyone's playing that game, it's like it becomes more egregious, I guess. And maybe it's almost like Star Wars. It's like, Jedi were creating order and all this stuff. This gets near yin yang a little, but it's like there's a balance to the Force, and so it seems like we've gone way too Emperor on things, and now we're gonna have to feminize, but it isn't like a combating like feminism and all. It gets tricky. I mean, obviously, identity politics and all this kind of stuff gets tricky. So I'd like to think that we're exactly where we need to be, but that doesn't mean it's comfortable.
No,
Like growing
and
pains
if you think
hurt.
about, yeah, when you think about the times in your own life where you've done the most personal growth, it's never been the times when you've been having a gay old time, is it? Like, it's
Not typically.
No, it's usually through the struggles. That's where we are put in touch with the buried resources within us. That's what Pluto is. It's our buried treasure. It's our buried power. And it takes these huge challenges to be able to find them. And that's why I would put a more positive slant on that Pluto square that you've got coming up, or any Pluto transit, you know, or Saturn transit for that matter. It's we've become pleasure addicts. Our capitalist society that always wants to sell us something like all the time that lasts a very short time, preferably so you have to buy another one. We just want pleasure all the time, a hit of pleasure, quick pleasure, instant
We're all
results.
dope heads, dopamine heads now, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. We need our hit. We're junkies. And these are the planets that say, hey, you know, play the long game, and you're going to get really lasting results beyond this lifetime with Pluto. You know, so it's really sensible to just pay attention to the messages that they're trying to give us. But Pluto will put you in touch with stuff that you perhaps have been trying to work out for several lifetimes. If you really if you meet the opportunity within that transit fully, and see and apply the meaning to it of, you know, the love and light brigade really pissed me off, not just because I have so much Pluto in my chart, but it's like, it's just bypassing. We did not come here just to work out how to just be perpetually happy and then die. Like, what's the point? You know, did you ever
life in the pursuit of happiness, right? I mean, the American kind of ideals. Like, I was actually debating that with my nana today because we saw some video or whatever of so this gets tricky because I'm not judging it, but I was like, I understand. Okay, so it was basically a transsexual woman who was a man who is basically like, I'm a wolf, and it was like, it gets into like high imaginational stuff, and at one level I'm like, this is a really interesting embodiment of life as art. Sure, like if they want to do this trip, they're doing it, but then it gets into like it hits the system. I mean, there's this friction where it's like, how are you going to explain that to this? Like I said, because to my nana, I was like, that's a constitutional right, the pursuit of happiness. That's that individual's pursuit of happiness, right? By their definition, to like kind of go down this really weird journey. But that doesn't mean it translates to the masses or something like that. So it's like this weird place where people are like, everybody wants to be, it's kind of Age of Aquarius stuff. Everybody's like got tribal tattoos and doing all the weird shit, but it's like, but who's really authentically doing that versus just being weird for weird's sake?
Weird for weird's sake is kind of the shadow side of Aquarius, because as I was saying earlier, everyone wants to understand and be seen for their own unique individual qualities. Like, what did you come to this planet for? Why are you here? What's unique about you? And because we're not given the opportunity to explore that, and because astrology and things like that help you do it have been occulted on purpose to stop that happening, on purpose, in order to have more control over us, I strongly believe. You know, people are desperate to try and be, it becomes like anything that isn't the mainstream therefore must be right. And then
and I have an issue. That gets tricky. I mean, all of a sudden you're doing things out of reaction as opposed to response. It's like, it's trickier. You're not thinking things through. It's like, I mean, this has happened, right? Even, well, I won't have to go into it deep, but it's like, screw corporate media. Let's do our own thing, kind of thing. And there's it's tricky, right? And that's that watchword for my whole life. It's complicated, right?
Exactly. Babies and bathwater. There's so much like, and again, when we're going through very Plutonian times, there's this polarizing binary, baddies versus goodies, extremes. You're either there or you're here. And actually life happens in the gray area in between the extremes. and no one's really very comfortable being there. You know, we want these immediate, gratifying, instant, extreme, powerful hits of stuff, you know, and so we're kind of like trained that way. But it's actually, you know, the boring stuff in the middle, the gray areas in between, that's where we really craft the human experience. I think that's where all the good stuff goes down, really, in the boring, unexciting stuff a lot of the time.
You made me think of Forrest Gump a little, where it's like Jenny is the impulse-driven person, right? I mean, you've seen Forrest Gump, I'm imagining. The guy who wrote that book is from the town I'm in right now, so it's like a big deal here. But anyway, Fairhope, Alabama, or nearby here. Greenbow, Alabama is where he's from. Anyway, but the point being, Forrest Gump is living in the gray, although he's necessarily a part of big pivots in society. Like he was at this thing, you know, it's like he's unaware of it. He's unself-aware. So he's kind of in the gray fundamentally by accident, whereas Jenny's pursuing, you know, the sexiest guy or the hardest drug or whatever, and it's got dire consequences. I mean, at the end, it's like she's kind of the bad guy. She lived very selfishly. And that's kind of the dark side, I guess, of New Age and kind of hippie things, where I'm not against it, because Raphael has ecstasy as a life purpose in the Gene Keys. I do not. I have silence, I think, is mine. So it's always funny to me because he's always like, just do whatever, man. Like, he's a Libra, right? So I'm like, bro, you've seen me smoke and drink, and I'm not myself when I'm that way. I want to be able to partake, but I can't. I have no self-control. It's a whole trip. But I guess what I'm rambling towards is like, good things are awesome when they're valued. Like, if you just kind of overdo it, you lose the buzz, and then you have to go harder. So all of a sudden, I mean, you end up with a society of people who are like, and this isn't exactly why, but it's like, you know, transsexual wolves or whatever's going on. It's like they're needing to get their fix through individuation because of a reaction to the conforming, but they're doing it in such an extreme way that, is it even authentic to them ultimately, or is this a phase? I don't need to get into that rabbit hole, but I think you see what I'm saying.
I totally get what you mean, and it's a really interesting topic to observe at the moment, because I really feel like this is a teeny weeny tiny minority group within the global population.
For sure.
And there are a lot of minority groups within the global population. So why is this one being the one that, you know, the authorities and everyone are so adamant that everyone has to be
That's the narrative of choice right now. Yeah. I mean, on the positive polarity, it's like it's their time to shine, kind of like, I don't know, black rights in the 60s or something, or women's rights. Like, there's a time for certain paradigms to shift, but at the same time, it feels force fed, and like you're the bad guy if you don't agree.
And trust that feeling, because intuitively, I feel like this is being that minority of being exploited in order to normalize the idea of changing what we see as the human form. So when Saturn finishes Pisces in a couple of years' time, it's gonna join together with Neptune at the Aries point. So the Aries point is the very, very first degree of the zodiac. That's the point where spirit enters the human body and we become a human being. Neptune dissolves and morphs things, all right? It unboundaries things, so it makes us extremely vulnerable. And Saturn is, you know, it has an agenda. It has a more of a power agenda, essentially. And I have concerns.
It's like the circus leader in Pinocchio. It's like, I love you, Pinocchio. Please join my circus. I'm going to control you. There's an agenda, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's normalizing the idea that how we have thought of what it is to be a human being is something that is fluid and changeable, and particularly when you consider, you know, transhumanism and the, you know, the power that that artificial intelligence and all of these kind of like run before you can walk progressions into the technological era in the hands of the people who have been running the show up till now and has got us to this place. I'm not sure, you know, that's like, you know, giving a bunch of toddlers a car. It's not the car's fault. There's nothing inherently wrong with technology or artificial intelligence or anything, but it's in whose hands. And I have great concerns about how little say the global population have been given in this way that we are being sort of guided to evolve. And I have some cynicism around why this particular minority group, out of all of the minority groups there are, who specifically want to change the human body and the whole identity. Aries is me, the man. Who am I? What is my identity? You know, when Neptune goes in there, Neptune has a dissolving quality. It's just going to be like, oh, you thought humans looked like this. Well, let's dissolve all of that. You know, well, that's potentially great. We could become something much better. But also, you know, with Saturn alongside, Saturn tends to have more of a malefic effect. So it may also herald a time of there being of us understanding what the consequences are of the fact that we've been unboundaried and that we've been too open and too fluid. That's what Pisces Neptune is, fluid. So when we talk about gender fluidity, we're going into a whole time of potentially everything about what it is to be human could be presented to us as being fluid.
Which could be, on the one hand, a liberating thing for some, and a very Luciferian agenda kind of thing on the other, where it's like, you know,
I'm
well,
even
we're just
thinking,
making.
even here, I don't know the exact astrological timing on the fluidity part right now, but even here, because so oftentimes I'm wondering about this, I believe it's a J.R.R. Tolkien quote, the idea that the negative polarity or whatever force, whether it's a force out of pure stupidity, whether it's a, you know, Gnostic necessity or whatever, but that this type of force actually cannot create anything original out of itself. And this would, of course, confirm the idea, of course, because I've seen different videos, this has been planned for 50 years, most likely what went down, and many other things. But it's also clear that they chose, for whatever reason, or for their astrological reasons, this particular point in time space, right? So I completely lost the first point I wanted to make. I'm sorry.
We were talking about fluidity.
The most conducive window
Right.
for pushing this agenda.
Right. So basically just asking, because we talk about, you know, I'm a attack helicopter or something, and maybe this actually points to a real, true, immense potential we have to, you know, be, I would say, fully human actually, or whatever this means right now. But the degree of extreme change in this case is not towards something as it is presented that may be absurd, like, you know, I feel like I'm a helicopter today, but the degree of it points to a potential that is real, and that would probably more be like, oh, we can all be telepathic, we can all actually remember, you know, why we're here, you know, you see what I'm saying? And I'm almost thinking that this could be like a masking of that and an attempt at a diversion, because there is a lot of potential, because this force by itself generally would not even be able to create momentum. They can just put their mask on it and then trying to say that's what it is. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much all starts now, Raphael, to be honest, with Saturn going into Pisces. And in fact, the last lunation we had, with Saturn going into Pisces, it's co-present with Neptune, like straight away. But essentially that conjunction at the Aries point, which is such a sensitive point, that's 2026. So, and we're leading up to that essentially as of Saturn ingressing Pisces on the 7th of March. So we're in that space now. And this is a time of Pisces season is when we prepare for a new beginning. The new beginning comes at Aries at the spring equinox. So this is the time to be prepping and going. And a lot of people are going to get very kind of disillusioned and depressed by the loss of reality. So what we've all created from the chaos of life is an accepted norm of what it's all about. All right. The reason we're here is to go to school, get a job, buy things, get married, play golf, and die. And everyone just kind of conforms to that because it's too hard to think of anything else, really. That would require some personal responsibility. And we're not big fans of that. We've been encouraged to give that away. So, you know, we're going to go through this time of when Pisces is just going to dissolve the, you know, we've got a huge time of there being a mistrust, an inherent sense of mistrust in the system and in the structure for a huge number of people, actually bigger than I think they let on.
Like 9 out of 10 monkeys are not happy right now, basically. I think most people are just like, what the fuck? And then they're just like, tonight's news is keep buying lottery tickets, and gas prices, inflation. I mean, it's like the story isn't, at some point we're going to rip out of the fucking madhouse here. I mean, it's
and Pisces is the madhouse, and it's the place where we try and escape reality. And when Saturn comes along, it's just going, hey, guess what? Reality's here. Like there is no escape. So all these people
one flew over the cuckoo nest.
It's like we don't watch the news anymore. We just turn that off, and I'll just focus on my own little bubble and da da da. Nah, that's not going to cut it with Saturn in Pisces. It's going to be like, there is no escape. Actually, there is no escape. And so that's going to require us, I think, to do some really hard work on working out for ourselves what is the meaning of life. If it isn't just the buy stuff, get married, have kids, die thing, then what is it? So there's going to be a lot of lost souls and a lot of people feeling the weight of the responsibility of having a spirit. Like Saturn in Pisces, the responsibility of being a spiritual being is just going to find people for the first time in their lives, I think. Because everything out there has stopped having the answers, or the answers they're giving are just like, well, that doesn't register anymore. So who do I turn to? Well, of course, God, higher power. That's where we always go, right? And there is a spiritual void in our culture that's kind of aching for some attention. So I think Saturn's gonna sort of rub our noses in that one a little bit. And I'm hopeful that will enable people to strengthen and have a little bit more respect, which is a Saturnian thing, for the sacredness of humanity, because it is a miracle. We're all miracles. This is what I've said recently to my group of followers.
I watched that video.
We're an absolute fucking miracle. The fact that, this little baby was born and that was you, and it could do all this stuff is fucking amazing. And we're only like 2% different to chimps genetically. Just this tiny little tip in our favor, and we think we're so great. It's hilarious. But, we are a miracle, and we should have some respect for that. And living small, living in this way that we've been told to live, doesn't respect that. It doesn't honor that sacredness to us. And I think the people that I would like to see, and I would like to facilitate in some way, a greater level of hard work being put into our spiritual selves at this time, and a better honoring of the sacredness. Because then when people come along and they say, oh, hey, your sacredness, would you mind if I just stick an experimental thing in there that might have consequences that we don't know about, but hey, like, no, we need to develop some boundaries around our spirit, because we've become too laissez-faire with it all. And I think that's something that could have dire consequences when Neptune and Saturn meet up.
The dream will become deferred for sure at some point. It's going to be interesting. It's an apocalypse of some sort, an aeon shift. I don't know how you want to frame it, but it's like things are not okay in Kansas. The tornado's ripping through. We might end up in a colorful fucking dream with, poppy fields or whatever. But yeah, it's tricky to know how to do it. So what in your mind is, I mean, you were saying you want to help facilitate people to be mature. What, if you could like close your, third eye and project in the future, where are you wanting to go personally? Not necessarily exactly in the world, but sure, you could say that. Or, what is your dream as a Pisces in these changes to facilitate the said changes?
I think for me, it's just reminding people and keeping the dialogue going around spirituality, and the fact that we are so much more than our avatar that we all live through these days, and just hold space for people to be able to, perhaps for the first time in their life, explore a deeper side of themselves that culture doesn't encourage, or facilitate in any way, people are going to be massive. There's going to be a lot of bubbles bursting, you know, a lot of disillusionment. And that's a very vulnerable space. Pisces is where we can be a victim of our own naivety, our own innocence, our own sweetness, and our own lack of boundary. And a lot of people are going to kind of, well, you see it already with the vax, right? Buyer's remorse on that. Like, oh my God, why did I do it? Why did I put it in my body? How do I get it out? You know, there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing going on. And I think for those of us in a position of having already gone through that and worked with it a little bit, I think almost we have a responsibility and a duty, which is another Saturnian thing, to the fact that we all are connected spiritually. Like, we do better when everyone else does better. Like, it's in our own interests for other people to do well and to feel good and to be healthy and to have a sense of meaning and purpose to their lives. Is good for all of us. And you spread that word rather than that we must compete with each other and we must fight with each other, and if they're doing well then you're doing bad. That kind of narrative is something that we need to do our little bit to discourage. And so that's essentially where I kind of focus my work, and also connecting back to the natural rhythms and cycles of life. So my aim is to buy land in Portugal. England's getting a bit crazy. We've got these 15-minute cities springing up where you.
What does that mean?
Well,
in a nutshell. Yeah.
In a nutshell, they are exploiting the climate crisis as an excuse to be more authoritarian. This is my personal view.
I get that.
Yeah.
You've never even heard of this. I saw you posting about it and I was like, what the heck? Is this like, what, a parking meter city? How does this work? What is going on?
Yeah, essentially it's like number plate recognition. Everyone's in a 15-minute zone and you're not allowed to leave your 15-minute zone other than certain permitted times and for a certain number of days a year. I think it's 100 at the moment. And it's under the guises of, you know, it'll cut down
stuff.
on pollution.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Right.
Well, I don't know if freedom was ever a thing, but now it surely is not. It's like,
and
hey,
it should be what the fuck, right? And it's not. Jim, this is the crazy thing. It's not. There's like a tiny section of people who are like, what the fuck? And everyone else is just like, oh, okay.
Most people are watching Netflix or saying, hey, I don't have COVID. I guess give me an 8th booster or whatever. I mean, the trans is fully engaged. Yeah. Well, I don't watch the fucking news, but that's because I'm willfully ignorant at this point.
There you go.
Raphael, to do it. Yeah, I mean, I own it. It's like, hey, I read a lot of Warhammer 40K books. I don't even fucking look at the stars like you do right now. I'm just like, what will beat Que Sera, Sera? Like, I don't know how to impact it. It feels like a tsunami. It's like wearing a little Speedo and a fucking like duck, you know, pool ring around me, and here comes the tsunami, and I'm just like, what am I supposed to even do? Like, really though, like I'll try to hold my breath, but I mean, I can't swim for you, and I can barely swim myself. So
but this is the thing, this is what I'm saying. I think Saturn in Pisces is going to be that, like, reality is going to cut into any way that we're trying to escape it, and it's going to filter in, because ultimately we are all connected. So the collective pool of consciousness has a vibration. So we're going to feel that vibration of what's happening out there, like whether we're listening to it and hearing it and seeing it.
Is screaming. A lot of people are fucking suffering. We're gonna not be able to just do Grubhub and Netflix forever. Like, it's just things are gonna hit. I get it. And what's weird is, like, convenience isn't bad. It's just don't idolize it. Gender identity isn't bad. Don't make that your fundamental point of perspective. Psychedelics are cool. You can't just trip every day all day and not function. Like, your bowel, you know, you have to, your DNA will be all fucked up I imagine if all you do is eat acid every day. It probably isn't a good situation. Though John Lennon, I think, did it, but he didn't turn out. I mean, he had a heroin phase because he blew out the light bulbs or whatever, you know. So it's like, okay, I guess he had also the privilege to do that. And then it even gets into, like, he might have been a psyop ultimately anyway. But I don't want to get into that.
But yes, it's interesting, this conversation, because Saturn and Jupiter are what we call the societal planets. They're what shape society. So we had them coming together, the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, a couple of years ago. And they work together because Jupiter has this expansive influence on us is more, like let's do more, let's learn more, let's have an adventure, like there's no limit. And Saturn's very humbling, and it says, whoa there, hold on, you can't just party perpetually. You also have to eat some vegetables and go to sleep and do some like stuff. So those two planets need to kind of like be in a balance of, you know, not too much excess and not too much restriction. And we're trying to find the Goldilocks kind of sweet spot with society. And yeah, at the moment, I feel like we just have the shadow side of both coming out. So
there's a lesson in there, I guess. It's funny because with Saturn, I'm always like that Snape, and Jupiter is Dumbledore or whatever. So it's like, you know, he's like, Harry, yes, you win. Have my Phoenix. I love you. Come on up to my office. Or, you know, it's like more. And Snape's like, fuck you. I did karma for your mother. I don't even like you, really. You know, it's like, I'll die for you, but sure, fuck you. Anyway, it's a tricky trip. We could start winding down if you would like. Is there anything that we haven't addressed? I'd love to get you back on because I know that you weren't mentally probably ready to try to give your biography. Maybe I should have been more explicit about that. I was like, I want to know who's, you know, open the oyster and see the pearl. And you're like, I just want to talk about the astrology. And it's like, all right, cool. But you did well. I appreciate you opening up and giving us a kind of understanding of who you are and where you came from to some degree. I should just look at your chart really. But is there anything that you haven't said that you want to address? Or Raphael, is there anything, you know, that you have queries about while we got her here?
I just wanted to touch on something with Raphael actually, because
oh yeah, he's a funny cat. Talk away about him, because people usually talk about me and I'm like, he's funnier than me.
This is one of the synchronicities that I often find with astrology, is that what's taking place in the sky will often show up in the people that show up in my life. What we have right now, you're looking at the sky perhaps at night over there. I don't know if people are noticing Venus and Jupiter conjunct in the sky.
My brother mentioned it. He's like, what two stars are together? I was like, it's cloudy. I don't know. And then I looked and it's like, oh yeah, those are planets, bro. Anyway. Yeah.
It's Venus and Jupiter. So it's a big deal right now. Jupiter is meeting up with Chiron.
Fun.
The wounded healer, you know, our perennial sore spot of where we feel like we're not good enough. But they have a lot in common. Like mythologically, Chiron was a centaur and he was a teacher and a healer, and he had this incurable wound. But then you pinged over Raphael's chart to me, and Raphael, you actually have this in your natal chart. You have Jupiter conjunct Chiron, and I just wondered if you were aware of that and if you could speak to it at all, or if that would be of any interest to your audience. I don't know, Jim. It just interested.
I'm interested. Yeah.
Sure.
So basically, if you don't know, Jupiter's expansion and like more, how do you like it? And Chiron's like, here's my deep cut. So it's like, you gotta, I mean, if you want to kind of bullet point it, it's like Raphael, is it in Aries or where is his natally?
Cancer.
Not Cancer. All right. So like you might have big family wounds, mother wounds, that kind of stuff, self-nurturing wounds that you've overcome. Because I don't know him personally. I haven't met Raphael yet, but I know he had a life before drugs and after drugs, I think. It's better to say. It's like he was kind of a corporate, not a square, but I think he was like more like a brick in the wall. And then he kind of started smoking weed and channeling and is not that guy anymore, clearly. So anyway, Raphael, if you understand the archetypes, tell us what you feel.
Yeah, so basically I would maybe, Alexandra, could you give a timing to that? Like in terms of particular years where it would affect me in particular, because some things like, you know, Uranus return.
Like your Jupiter returns. So every 12 years there we go through a leveling up, a maturation point. With Jupiter, there can often be like a need to to reach a wider audience. So it can be the philosopher or the teacher or the guru or the mentor. This is what Jupiter represents. And alongside Chiron, there can be a need to kind of like get the word out there about healing and the different ways that we can heal and learn about healing, and be kind of like a teacher healer combined kind of thing.
If I hear Shilajit one more time, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I can grab it. No, certainly in a certain sense it is interesting, because ultimately I would say this certainly has been a core interest of mine, how to share that type of information, also wherever it may lead with all the Scorpio aspects and so on. And this is both on the mental and belief system sphere or the world simulation, you know, breaking away from that to be able to be more healthy in thought, in mind, and so on. Same thing with any type of material idea, emotional idea, more woo ideas about healing. So certainly has been, I would say, the main focus, or everything else kind of is surrounding and supporting that idea from in terms of what is interesting or exciting to me. That's certainly been, I would say, a very consistent theme. Again, whether it's about universal law or whether it's about eating particular types of herbs or whatever it may be. So
yeah, I mean, Cancer rules our emotion because it's ruled by the moon, so it speaks to our emotional kind of programming, like our subconscious habitual programming that we may have acquired in our upbringing, in our home and family life. But also there's an ancestral link, there's a historical link as well. So ancestral healing and that kind of thing may be something of interest too. But it's really good because with Saturn moving into Pisces, because Pisces is a fellow water sign of Cancer, Saturn will create what we call a trine aspect to that part of your chart in the next couple of years. And that's really going to help to crystallize it and give it some real like integrity.
Bones.
Yeah, it's really going to solidify that and strengthen it and just help you like really pull it all together and put it out there. So I'm excited for you. It's just
You're going to be the golden goose of Shilajit. He's going to poo Shilajit and we're going to all buy it. No, I'm kidding. He's so full of Shilajit that now he has some to give, like a cow's milk. In any event, yeah, if there, I don't know, Raphael, we got to geek out on your chart sometime.
We do.
More. I mean, we tend to drive by these things. And then I get self-conscious from like, I know you don't want to just sit there and talk about our charts. But it's always fun to become aware of oneself that much more. And you love doing this shit anyway, Alexander. So whatever, you don't care. This is like passing a joint to you. You're just like, whatever, here, give me that. And I'm just like, I don't want this is high THC content. Be careful. Like, I don't know if you can handle this. In any event, so
you are
any
Saturn
kind of
in Pisces at this point, Jim. The fun place.
I know. Well, I'm not. Well, it's tricky because it's like I don't know. It's learning. It's learning. I mean, it's like it's not. You can't be Captain Von Trapp. You don't want to squash the party so much that you ruin the inner child. But at this.
Yeah, now Jim froze.
I think it's a sign, right? It's a sign from the universe.
So now, Jim, you're back.
I don't even know. It said issues with the website or something. So I was like, oh shit. I don't know what I was even saying. Don't worry about it. Captain Von Trapp and Fräulein Maria stuff, Sound of Music. It's near Vienna, Salzburg, I guess. Yeah, no, it's a wreck. For me, basically, it's just like have fun but be responsible. That's
exactly. Yeah, that's the Jupiter Saturn piece, right? It's like expand but have a healthy respect for things.
You can't just wand everybody any which way. It's like there's limits. There are limits. And we tend to think, I mean, it's very easy to become Icarus and just fly. It's like your wings will melt. So
this is it, and this is what Saturn and its limits is about. You know, everyone thinks like Saturn's a bad guy and he just wants to stop everything and piss you off. He's not. He's trying to teach a healthy respect for things. He's trying to help you live a longer life. You know, if you do weight-bearing exercise, Saturn is heavy and he rules the bones. Weight-bearing exercise strengthens the bones. It makes us stronger, and that's the way looking. The way that I teach astrology is that there is no good and bad planets. You know, I've had shitty things happen with Jupiter and really awesome things happen with Saturn. It's just how you're meeting it with your interpretation and what you choose to channel from that planet. If you want to channel doom and gloom from Saturn, you can, or you can go, well, actually, it's teaching me about being mature and being able to last through life because I haven't burned myself out by the time I'm 30 partying. So yeah,
I heard that. That was not a personal attack, but I felt that one. It's like, oh shit.
So was it? Because you know
how am
me.
I not dead? Sometimes I wonder. It's like, Jesus, I'm sure I have 5 cancers and a liver issue, but no, I don't probably. Is there anything kind of in wrapping up? Like, we put your website on we'll put it on the links, but if you want to mention that, how to get in contact with you, kind of what you're up to, and maybe it doesn't have to be your epitaph forever, but it's like a parting kind of thought that you want to leave us with.
I mean, more than anything, I would just really love to say, if any part of our conversation has sparked any interest in astrology for you, I don't care whether it's me or anyone else, just follow it, because it's beautiful and it's empowering and it's incredibly, it's just wonderful. And I do really feel like it's been stolen. It's been hidden from us for a reason, to control us. And the more people who find their own power, the better chance we all have, I think, in navigating the next few years. So just go with it. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on most of my stuff's Facebook because I'm an oldie. Jupiter Returns or at Astrology Empowerment. I do a little bit on Twitter, but it's not really my thing, because, you know, to do justice to it, it takes a bit longer and it's a bit deeper and a bit juicier. It's not just a quick hit. But yeah, find me. I'm not putting an awful lot out there right now because I'm floating around in a camper van whilst I purchase some land in Portugal and hopefully set up some lovely astrology retreats that will be run during the solstices and equinoxes, which are real powerful points on the wheel of the year in order to recalibrate back into the natural rhythm and the Earth's frequency. And with Uranus in Taurus right now, that might not mean anything to you, but we need to do that. We really, really need to get back to, you know, into our bodies, into the earth, into being grounded, and really, really, really practice having a bit more respect for our spiritual nature. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Well, that's what's up. I really do appreciate you coming on and giving us time. We got through the technical difficulties. We made it. We didn't drown or die.
Somehow. I'm going to have the biggest lift right now.
Well, you're good. Nothing's perfect, but we had fun, right? So I've been doing this. I'm not gonna like make it a big thing, I don't think, but I have these little teas that have these yogi teas have these little quips on them, like quotes, and it says, "What belongs to you shall come to you." So we just have to be receptive and open to the river. Mercury's now in Pisces, as she's saying, and stuff. It's like we gotta flow, but we have to. I mean, you can drown and float down river, or you can swim. You might be Michael Phelps. There's a whole spectrum of ways to swim. So learn to swim, as Tool would say, because here comes some tsunamis.
Oh, and, I love it, Tool.
Yeah, they're oh, that's a Pisces thing for sure. It's like a psychedelic rock, bruh. But yeah, if we could help out in any way with the Portugal stuff, let me know. We'll talk. I mean, it's like I imagine I'll be in Europe sooner than later, just because I have so many friends over there. But anything, Raphael, that you want to capstone it with?
No, just to confirm what you said, there is certainly must be something to astrology, because supposedly JP Morgan said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do, and they'll have good reason for that. So there is some very relevant knowledge contained within. And yeah, thank you for sharing and revealing more of that and being such a, dare I say, splendid ambassador of those ideas. So thank you very much for
Thank you, and thank you for bearing with my atrocious abilities with things with wires and buttons on.
We got through it. Thank you very much.
Good to meet you, lovely. Take care. Bye.
We'll talk. Adios.
All right, Jim. Thanks. Bye.